So now that we break into the code in index method, let's try to step into the code now. So first step which executes, it says return a view. So obviously this method will try to hand over a page with some extension we picked up by default web form engine. So this will try to search for index.aspx and then we'll try to hand over that page since we have no data to so-called view engine. But then obviously we have not created any kind of a page right now. But what I said, it will look for index.aspx because the method name that we have is index.aspx. Let's continue and see what happens now. Step over, continue. Looks like I said F5 twice. And here we end up in exception. So if you guys can see the exception right now, that I could not find, the page says or the server says I could not find index.aspx or ascx, pxcx, chhtml or vbhtml, and look at the locations. It tried to search for the page with so and so extension or extensions in the folder called as views/home. And what was home in our case? Home was a controller name. So point to note here, if at all, let's say a controller is going to go and return any page, first of all, the page name may not be written in view function here because the default name searched is the method name itself. But what if I want a different name? We also have one overload into the view method which will expect us to have a different view name. So imagine if I put up a view name as maybe my view over here. And now again I'll run the project. Now when I run the project default, you may see that default always called is home controller and index method. So where is that default or startup application set or startup controller set? That's always there in this folder which is called as abstract folder. And then where it is written, so you may go to something called as root config, and inside the root config folder, though we are yet to understand this, there's default controller name and there is so-called default index method name as well. Now, but we'll not understand this right now, we'll just skip it. Reason behind that, in ASP.NET, normally you can right click on any ASP.NET page and you can say set as a startup page. But then how will I set up here which controller to start with and which method to start with? So if you have noticed, when I said F5 sometime back, I had to stop my program quickly, but then I couldn't because the default controller called without asking was home and default method called without asking was index. So let me show you one more time. Let me say F5 here. And as you can see, in the browser, I did not call for home/index, but where it has landed up right now is in the index method only. And now again, I am going to step into return view method, but this time the view searched should not be index.aspx or any extension. It should be my view. So if I run this, we end up in another exception, and it conveys that so sorry, I could not find my view. And I search for ASPX, ASCX, CHHTML and VBHTML inside these folders. So story is always and always the default location searched is a folder called as views right now. And inside the views, there's also one more folder. It will look into something called as home. So thing to do, we have to right click, add a new folder first. Let's name this folder as home because we are actually writing a view for home controller class. Then inside it, I'll add one more page. Let's add a view now. Obviously we want extension ASPX and the page name that we want was my view. By default, we do have a concept like master page, content page, then maybe let's say some user control concept, but we'll not touch that right now. Let's simply create my view as a page name. As you can see, there's a new page created called as myview.aspx. Important point to note, we do not have any .cs file if you can notice. And this page is a bit different. This page doesn't inherit from system.web.ui.page class, which is normally a base class for ASP.NET. This page inherits from a different base. It's system.web.mvc.view page. Now, what is this dynamic over here? We'll get back to it. Not now. Let's try to understand very basics first. And here somewhere in H1, I'll write down this is MVC view. And then in the controller, I already have given search for my view. So default it will look for view home my view folder. My view contains no code right now, but only markup language. So server will find out that markup and give you as it is. Let's try to run now. I'm not going to, you can say stop in the breakpoint. I'll say continue though. And here we have a solution which is, this is MVC view. If you say right click and say view source, you can find out the entire HTML lies in front of you. Entire HTML as it is on the screen. So it's that easy in MVC that we can very well go and have a controller. We can have a view with the name which is specified in the view folder, a view function. If the name is not given, it will default search for a kind of, you can say, page with the extension index dot and some other extension. Why was it searching for ASPX and CHHTML? Because default with MVC3 onwards, we have both the engines available. That is, one is ASP.NET Web Form Engine, which supports extensions with pages like ASPX, and other one called as Razor, which supports a different syntax but extensions like CHHTML and VBHTML. So hopefully this is clear so far. And now we will dig in more into this application again and we'll try to understand how sequentially it goes using a stack trace concept. So same application, same thing I'm going to go and run now. But then in the ASPX page, I'm just going to go and put some server side code. How will I go and put a server side code? So if you know, in ASP.NET Web Forms, we had a concept called as um, eval statement, which always used to execute on server side when we used to put the statement into percent brackets. So here in ASP X view, we have got percent bracket symbol for server side code. So just like in PHP you define question mark PHP, same way we'll define here, this is server side code. Those people who are, you can say, well known to classic ASP, it is similar to classic ASP writing right now. Although in classic ASP we used to author a code in JavaScript or VBScript, and now we author a code in case of C#. So here we'll write down a very simple code, something called as, let's say, test. I just want to put a breakpoint. So maybe I'll put a breakpoint. Now there's no breakpoint right now, but maybe we'll try to add a breakpoint in a while. So as of now, I'll just keep the empty brackets as it is. And let me go to home controller one more time. So let me run this code and let me show you what happens behind the scene. F5, we hit this breakpoint. We'll go to ASPX. Now, unfortunately, we don't have any code. So let me stop this code first. Let me write down a very simple code now. Let's call this as model only, which means I'm just asking it to basically print some model content. This code has no meaning right now. Reason behind that, we literally don't have any code authored so far. But then this is just to put a breakpoint so that we can come to here. Run now. So we end up in index method. Let's step over. Let's go in, and then here we break for a while. And this is exactly where I want to check my stack, because we have gone through almost entire life cycle. Now let me right click here and show external code is what I'll do, and go to call stack now. And entire call stack I'm going to copy, and I'm going to put in notepad now. And we'll start from the bottom of the call stack. So let's try to understand how the sequentially it has traveled. So first time when the call was offered, what was loaded in memory was system.web.dll, which means there was no sign of system.web.mvc at all. So after system.web.mvc, system.web.dll, there was a call given asynchronously to one of the method that you may notice. Now we can say after, I guess it has gone down. So if you see from system.web.dll, afterwards the call has gone to system.web.mvcdll, which means we included in between. Afterwards, if you see, the call was given from MVC, and I hope we can notice controller class object and execute method. Maybe I should search for it. Yes. So as you can see, there's a method that we have, which is, no, this is not the method. Maybe I should search upward. Let's find up. So there's only one execute method. It looks like it is calling internally async manner. So you can see from the controller, you would find that there's a method called as execute method, and that execute method internally gives a call to another method which is called as, you can see that, invoke action as another method, which will internally give a call to index method. And as we have seen and we have gone through the index method, you'll find out now I have put a breakpoint. If you have noticed, I have put a breakpoint inside the page, which means now rendering is on, which means HTML generation is in progress. So that is also recorded. So somewhere at the top, I should be able to see a method called render. You can see that. So there's a method called as render view, which is getting called. And this method will be internally giving call to another method, which is called as, yes, system.web.ui control, and for that it's giving call to the method system.web.ui.page.render, which means again a call comes back to system.web.dll. Now why? Because we are using a engine which is web form engine. So let me tell you that the web form engine used in ASP.NET, which means the, you can say, engine or API which generates the HTML finally in ASP.NET, and in MVC, ASPX view specifically is the same engine. But then with MVC, when we go for Razor, it's a different engine. It has got different render method in MVC engine, in Razor engine, compared to what you see right now in front of you. So in sequence, if you see the call to system.web.dll, then process request, then it will give a call to system.web.mvc. After MVC, call goes to controller class. After the controller class object, execute method. After execute, it will give a call to so-called render view method. Rather invoke action method. Invoke action will give a call internally to a render view method, and which in turn gives a call to a render of normal web form engine only, because we have picked up a page with the extension ASPX. So let me stop this now. Let's not save this and let's continue. And we have output which is ASPX output right now. Maybe as of now, since this code was only for the breakpoint, there's nothing called as model which is available. So obviously we'll end up in null reference error. So we can skip that part, and we can also comment this part as we are not using it anywhere so far. So point to understand here, we have got a simple sequence we try to understand. If I go to home controller class and if I show you what lies in controller, let me go to definition of controller. Now if you can see, controller is actually an abstract class as we discussed some time back. And then this also comes from one more base class called as controller base. If you go to controller base, again go to definition, which internally has this method which is called as execute, and execute method internally gives a call to many methods in sequence, and one of the method was a method called as invoke action method, and that invoke action method was internally giving call to that render view was calling render method. So if you see, it's actually kind of a 3D model that in a 2D way it seems it's calling sequentially, but then each step internally dives deep, and then one of the step is execute that we have. So if I see controller has a flow, controller object gets created, controller.execute method gets called, execute internally dives in and gives a call to many other methods in sequence, and those methods can be customized based on the need by I can say a programmer. So how does it work? How do I pass on data from maybe controller to the UI? That part is what we'll talk about in the next session.